I'm not entirely sure what I did in a past life to deserve this, quite frankly, pardon the pun, unjustly treatment from the YouTube algorithm, as I simply try to watch videos relating to the up and coming series of Alien Earth or wrestling videos or whatever it may be to pacify myself on a Friday evening, you know, up and coming time and time again. The recommendations continuously end up being videos of Nicola Sturgeon. Isn't it strange? Just on a side note, that Nicola Sturgeon seems to be doing a bit of a media tour at present. She's actually had more appearances on fucking all these news stations, whether it's in Scotland or England or elsewhere, to yammer on about how hard done by she's been in the past few years, as well as promoting her book, indirectly or otherwise. She's had more appearances on all these media shows than she's actually had appearance wise in our parliament, despite being paid to elect the people who allegedly voted her in the first place. She's had more appearances on media shows, news shows, etc., than she's actually had Hollywood appearances since her resignation. Isn't that a bit strange? Let's not forget here, since we're on the topic, because I'm getting a bit pissed off, quite frankly, again, pardon the pun, with this nonsense. Let's just remind ourselves ever so slightly about the fact that she got 6 figures for this book. Right? The book deal, signed by Thin Lips, is to tell all about her life in politics, which is apparently, according to the Daily Record Band 2023, is worth at least 150 grand. Right? And there she is there. Fuck off. Thin Lips announced she had signed a deal with publisher Pan Macmillan last week after a battle for the rights to her story. Her agent, Andrew Gordon, said there had been a hotly contested 9-way auction for the book, which will focus on her life before politics as well as significant political events during her time in Hollywood, including slandering Alex Salmon, who's now dead, etc., as well as really laying it on thick when it comes to the stress that she endured during COVID. Fuck off. Regardless, while the winning publisher remained tight-lipped, or thin-lipped, should I say, about how much they paid for the rights, several high-placed sources have told the Sunday Mail that the deal is worth more than 150 grand. Lo and behold, a couple years later, and what do we have? Her on a media tour. Strange that. And then, of course, let's just not forget as well, and she's not the only person that does things like this, so I'm not poo-pooing her for that per se, but one of her first appearances for the longest time since all of this shit began, after her resigning a couple of years ago, then her and her homosexual husband allegedly get arrested. She randomly appears on ITV. What would she pay for that? 25 grand. Right? All about the money, money, money. Woe is me and money, money, money. Right? Of course it is. Of course it is. Yeah. Right? And I realized I didn't even share the top there, but there you go. Sturgeon paid 25 grand for ITV general election appearance. I mean, to be fair, appearance fees are a thing. That's not the point. She's barely fucking around. Hasn't been around for some time. But yeah, she appears with that for that sweet, sweet paycheck. But she's such a compassionate politician. Yeah, she. Anyway, right? But get this. This is why I'm making this video, because I'm getting annoyed now with this constant, never-ending BS.
But whenever I broadcast a program from anywhere, if I'm in a cab, I always say to the cab driver, look, what would you want me to ask the politician that I'm interviewing? So today, I asked a Glasgow cab driver.
Asking Glasgow cab drivers anything is very brave.
Yeah, he gave me quite a few questions.
I bet he did.
But the first one was, why did she resign?
I resigned for the reasons I set out when I made the statement saying that I was going to resign. Look, I mean, I'll cut to the chase here. 8 days after I left office as First Minister, the thing that everybody saw on the televisions around my house happened. I think it is entirely understandable that people think, she knew that was about to happen, so that's why she resigned. Categorically, that's not the case. I mean, the period between me saying I was going to resign and actually leaving office, people around me will say I was more relaxed than I'd been in a long, long time. I was looking forward. If I'd known that what happened was about to happen, I would have been unable to function. I stood down because I'd reached a point I was exhausted, to be honest. We'd just come through COVID. I'd been First Minister for 8.5 years. The COVID years made it feel much longer than that. I felt I just had nothing more to give. I felt, politics, not just in Scotland, but globally, becoming so polarised, so toxic. I felt I was part of that.
The only brief concession that I am prepared to make in relation to the timeline of her resignation and whatnot is that, of course, there's always the possibility that her standing down had absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with what occurred not too long after the fact. However, there's also the other side of the argument, or the theory, if you will, that she's talking BS. And quite frankly, again, pardon the pun, yeah, I'm inclined to believe the latter, right? Regardless of that fact, though. She then starts to bang on about COVID, etc. She stood down. Her time was up. She stood down because her time was up. BS. And I'm going to come on to the COVID stuff in just a sec.
That kind of, determination to kind of pry into my personal life, I think went beyond what it should have done. And part of the reason I've chosen to open up about my personal life in this book is because I think after that, I want to try to redraw the boundaries. I don't expect I can ever be completely private and anonymous, but I do think for the next phase of my life, I want to redraw the boundary between the public and the private and actually reclaim a private life.
Who in their right mind yammers on about wanting a private life while simultaneously appearing on next to every single media outlet that is going to talk about her private life, as well as promoting her book, which she was paid exponentially well for allegedly writing herself. If you want a private life, if you want people to stop focusing on you as a person and your private life and whatnot, then maybe, just maybe, take a backseat and shut the fuck up. But no, it's easier to whine about how hard done by you are. But here lies the crux of the issue in question, which is her. Let's go down the memory lane, shall we? Ever so slightly. In 2015, Scotland became one of the first countries in the world to adopt the Global Goals for Sustainable Development, Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, irrespective of how you choose to refer to it as such. Who signed Scotland up for that? Oh, indeed, it would be none other than Nicola Phillips. 2015, Scotland became one of the first countries in the world to adopt the Global Goals for Sustainable Development. Right? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Doesn't stop there, if only it did. Or what about Scotland becoming the first country out there? Yes. Scotland will become the first country in the world to embed the teaching of LGBTI rights in schools, in what campaigners have described as a historic moment. Yeah, very fucking progressive. Scotland to embed LGBTI teaching across the curriculum. Yeah. Under her watch, of course. Yeah. Of course, yeah. What about the fact that under her watch, and albeit, yeah, you're going to get somebody that's going to try and push back and say, well, it didn't become finalised until after she stood down. Good one, Gaji. The point is here, though, Nicola Sturgeon, for the longest time, was a proponent of advocating and/or greenlighting the initiation of the UNCRC becoming Scots law, superseding our own law, because the United Nations knows best, of course. So obviously, her fucking legacy, if you will, in this particular instance, is that now, consequently speaking, children's rights will now be at the heart of decision-making across Scotland as the UN's Convention on the Rights of the Child comes into force, right? Making Scotland the first devolved nation in the entirety of the world to adopt such a mechanism. We could talk about the fact that she very quickly after getting into office post Alex Salmond introduced a national advisory council for women and girls in order to tackle misogyny and discrimination, etc., that she claims was rife across society. The National Advisory Council on Women and Girls exists to advise thin lips on what's needed to tackle gender equality, or inequality, I should say, in Scotland, Rainbow Unicorn Land. And as I pointed out in previous videos throughout the years, right, the reality of the matter is, irrespective of what these people actually presented to the government in terms of recommendations going forward to quell the alleged misogyny that was rife across society, guess what happened? Every single recommendation was fucking constantly, year after year, accepted in full, almost as if it's a cabal of feminists. Redacted. That said, just to sort of re-emphasize my point, though, right? Is this is Thin Lips? This is her legacy. Yeah. Oh my god. Yeah. Fucking hell. Let me see. How about the fact that Nicola Thin Lips declared a climate emergency at the S&P conference in 2019, where it says just down here that she told delegates in Edinburgh she was inspired after meeting young climate campaigners. Oh my fucking god, as if I needed any more vindication. But regardless of that fact, I'll come back to that if I can recall. However, Thin Lips said they are right and pledged to live up to our responsibility to halt climate change, announcing what she described as the S&P's biggest campaign on the economics of independence. Right, aye, okay, all right, aye. So it says here that Scotland school pupils in second mass climate strike. So let me get this straight. Children get propagandized in Scottish schools, courtesy of the SNP, courtesy of the Curriculum for Excellence. You think I'm talking shit? Let me fast forward to this ever so slightly. Yeah, oh, it's so easy to end up ranting on this bollocks, courtesy of that thin-lipped fucking baboon. However, right here we are, quality education. Let's see what Sustainable Development Goal 4 has to say about quality education, ensuring inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Oh, so inclusive. Oh, it's so fantastic. Education gains, blah, blah, blah. Point in case, of course, however, just so we don't lose sight of what I'm referring to here, right? Right? It says, right? By 2030, ensure that all learners acquire the knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development, including, among others, through education for sustainable development, sustainable lifestyles, human rights, gender equality, promotion of a culture of peace and non-violence, global citizenship, and an appreciation for cultural diversity, right? What does that remind you of? Oh, that's right. The Scottish education system, all, of course, which ended up becoming more and more and more and more fucking polarized and intoxicated, courtesy of Nicola Thin Lips, or at the very bare minimum, it occurred under her watch, right? So when children are demanding action on climate change, little propagandized children demanding action on climate change, all of a sudden, Nicola Thin Lips decides, now is the time to declare a climate emergency. Now is the time to make Scotland the first country in the fucking world, or one off, to declare a climate emergency. And on top of that, make Scotland one of the first countries in the world to embed a climate justice fund into fucking reality. Scotland was one of the first nations to commit funds specifically to climate justice, launching the Climate Justice Fund in 2012. This was before her time, but she made it ever more prominent when the COP BS came to fucking fruition in Glasgow just a few years ago. Yeah, right. This is the fucking reality of where we live at now. And just, there's so many other things I could say. And as far as the Kith was and continues to be concerned, I think she has got some gall about her to sit and whine, moan, and complain, and quite frankly, dare I say it again, pardon the pun, humanize herself for her fucking dehumanizing BS that she was privy to for many a year, while she stood there month after month after month at her podium, yammering on about a bunch of BS, parroting what Boris Johnson said, parroting what everybody else said, while simultaneously we're all being fed bollocks by the mainstream media that she's different to the rest. She's remarkable. She's such a remarkable woman, you know? Mainstream media coverage would have you believe at the time that she was the most trustworthy politician in the entirety of the UK, despite the fact she was literally saying fucking everything that Westminster was saying. Funny that, regardless though, she sat there for months, going in 2 years, banging on to no end about the vaccines when the time came, banging on about COVID, banging on about lockdowns, banging on about face coverings, banging on about the coof in and of itself, because the science was apparently settled. Such a great guru, weren't you, Nicola? I mean, come on. How could we forget this bollocks? It's easy to forget, but still though. Coronavirus, coof, COVID, whatever. There are no COVID-19 rules or restrictions in Scotland. We are now living with COVID-19 as one of a number of respiratory infections, There are things you can do to stay well and protect others. Try to stay at home if you have symptoms. Get the jib jab, blah, 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 right? Or we could just come to this. This was back in the day prior, right? Coof in Scotland, Dinlip says not to rule out vaccinating younger teens because the science is settled. Dinlips knows the script. Dinlips knows what is best for you. And if you have any inclinations to disagree, well, guess what happened to you back in those fucking times? Oh, yeah. Oh, how could we forget? Nicola Dinlips' message to Scots still to get vaccinated. What did she do back then? She called you deeply irresponsible and selfish. Oh, you thought that was bad? Oh, it gets even fucking worse than that, if you can't remember. Let me jog your memory. Yeah, she said that you were selfish if you you were opposed to the vaccine, of course. Yeah, the coof, yeah. And I've got these videos on my channel, by the way. But regardless, she also was heavily in favor of the passport scheme. Slammed, it was the usual proverbial BS that you've seen in the fucking the papers and whatnot, slamming people if they didn't agree with the passport stuff. And lo and behold, she then came out as time went on and conceded that Jesus, mate, get a grip. She conceded herself that here we go. Wait, here we go. I'll just give a wee article here, just so I don't need to look like I'm talking bollocks. On the matter, Nicola Dinlips has backed down on extending the government's passport scheme on Tuesday, but has refused to back the Conservatives' call to scrap it altogether. The First Minister did confirm a number of coof restrictions would come to an end in coming weeks following the Conservatives' demands on Monday. Right? All this tripe about passport schemes and whatnot. I mean, it went on for some time. So for her to sit there, and here's another one, by the way, while I'm on the topic. Right, here's another one just briefly. Children aged 5 to 11 in Rainbow Unicorn Land will be offered vaccines, according to Nicola Dinlips, right? The science is settled. Oh, it stresses me out so much. Me and my totally heterosexual husband, we broke up for nothing. Nothing untoward to see here. I couldn't give a shit about how unfortunate your life has become, Nicola, in recent years. Why don't you just fucking take your taxpayer-funded pension and do one? Because you have destroyed or played a part, quite frankly, again, pardon the pun, played a major role in the destruction of our country with your divisive bollocks and for all your tripe about being such an independent woman, regardless of who it is that directs any fucking criticism your way. You're very quick to turn on a dime and insinuate that it's misogyny and whatnot. I don't care about you and your fucking LGBT lifestyle. I don't care about you. I really wish you would fucking stop interfering with my YouTube algorithm and do one. Go away. Adios. For those, oh yeah, and by the way, while I'm on the topic, for anybody that actually feels sorry for this cunt, for anybody that actually thinks that what she's trying to do here is admirable, or whatever the case may be, bear in mind I could really go into some sort of rant about the independence bollocks, right? Okay, this is a woman that every election cycle would have you believe that a referendum was round the corner. The European elections, for example, the last European elections that the UK was privy to before we allegedly left the EU, right? What happened there? Sturgeon said that a vote for the SNP is not a vote for independence. Okay, you can vote for us, right? What happened? The second they got into, or the second, sorry, they won that election in a Scottish context, what did she do? She fucking completely disregarded what she said in the days leading up to the election and said, oh, look at that. All these votes is a vote for independence. Well, clearly, right? While simultaneously telling everybody who would listen that a vote for independence was a vote to rejoin the European Union. What did she do in the run up to the EU referendum in and of itself? Oh, that's right. She told everybody that a vote to leave the EU meant that a referendum in the future, a second independence referendum in a Scottish context, would never occur. So the only way to ensure that a second referendum in independence could occur is to fucking vote to remain in the EU. Make that make sense? But that's what she did. Every election after the fact, that is what she continued to do. Oh, vote for me, vote for me. Fuck off. Take your book and just come on. Come on, people are supposed to be better than that. But clearly they're not, eh? Anyway, adios.